Okay, this is part 2 of 90 Seconds to Orgasm. And when we left off in part 1, I was talking about the problems with my delicate wrists when I manually stimulated my wife's clitoris. Actually, it was actually a more vigorous thing than I'm making it sound. But I worked out a lot, and my skeletal, my joints were kind of sensitive. Anyway, I worried about it. So while things were working out orgasm-wise, my wrists were really becoming pained, and I was developing aches in my arm. So I went down to some sex toy shop in Houston and asked him for the most powerful vibrator. So the guy who was at the counter assisted. He said, "Well, my customers have been pretty satisfied with this." So I said, "Yeah, okay. So it needs batteries, right?" So I took it back, and when I opened it up, I couldn't figure out where to place the batteries. Fortunately, my wife had a certain facility with batteries, and she inserted them in the right place. But the vibrator was not vigorous enough. It didn't pump with sufficient force to bring her to orgasm. And by that time, I was enjoying not having to kill my arm. So I bought one that you plug in that looked, roughly speaking, like a miniature jackhammer. And so it was about like this. And I stuck it, sort of, and it worked beautifully. I mean, she was able to have 3 orgasms in 5 minutes, and then we had intercourse for, say, the next 45 minutes. So I figured, at this point, I was curious. I mean, this woman had this talent on her own behalf, and it was kind of nice having a wife who came fairly easily. And so I began to note the time. Well, I had noted the time with women for about 10 years, starting time, finishing time, to see how long I was holding back, see if I could do anything to prolong it, increase my skill level. So I did this, and in one case, it was running under 2 minutes, I was pretty sure. Once we got over that hump with the vibrator, then it was very rapid. And there's nothing subtle about my wife's orgasms. I mean, early in my youth, women faked orgasms, so you really didn't know what was going on. But my wife didn't fake anything, nor was she concerned about whether I enjoyed it. I mean, she was out for herself and did a good job of it. And also I could feel the contractions. So she got me some Viagra once, and while I didn't understand batteries and vacuums and even plug-in vibrators, that is, the movement of electrons that would provide energy, I understood the chemical explanation for Viagra. Viagra consists, among other things, of a substance that resembles a substance that's associated with producing an erection, of enabling blood to get into the area of the penis that does get hard. And then there's an enzyme which binds to that substance and therefore prevents it from getting in sufficient quantity. So that would be called some degree of erectile dysfunction. And the Viagra resembles the substance that aids the blood. And so it could trick the enzyme into binding to it, or it could bind to a receptor that the enzyme was related to, and thereby let the blood flow in naturally. So chemistry, yeah, the chemistry I understood. So now this didn't happen every time, but the first time we had intercourse in which I took Viagra, I lasted an hour, and she had 46 orgasms, plus or minus 2, let's say. And then 2 days later, I tried another Viagra, and this lasted 100 minutes, 1 2/3 hours, and she had 60 orgasms. And so if you average across that, it looked like about 1.5 minutes per orgasm. And we're talking about, this going on for an hour. So, it's like clockwork, across 60, really vigorous physiological responses, at which time she would collapse in sweat. I asked a doctor, a female doctor, I said, my wife, although we have a lot of sex, and it's way plenty for me, and it seems to be plenty for her, she doesn't ever seem to be satiated in the sense that the clitoris loses sensitivity. She just collapses of exhaustion. And she said, yeah, that she thought, like she knew, she thought, a lot of women had large capacities, it's just they're not given an opportunity to reach them. So then we spent a week in Galveston where I checked my own frequency, which was, actually it was 5 days. So we had intercourse 7 times. That was way over what was necessary, but it was a service I could provide. So, what impression do you get from all this? That I'm a sex fiend? That my wife was a sex fiend? Actually, I was her second husband, and she claimed, now, she was something of a liar, but she claimed she never had an orgasm in her first marriage. But that during her years between marriages, she masturbated and came to develop better control. And she explained this to a couple of fundamentalist Christians that we happened to strike up a conversation with riding on a New Orleans streetcar. Because the woman was a fundamentalist Christian sex counselor. And so my wife was giving her tips. Woman kept talking about, oh yes, I have sex once a week with my husband. He needs that to keep his prostate healthy. I didn't hear the word pleasure, and I didn't, I looked at the stony-faced guy she was sitting next to. But anyway, so, my wife's maybe could have written a book. It would have had to have been one of those assisted by books. Okay. The point is that over all these years, with all my sexual insecurities, after my wife died, I did have one more sex partner, and she was like my wife. I mean, rapid orgasms. That was pleasant, but maybe some of the earlier women I just didn't know what I was doing. So the point is, why is this guy counting the time spent during intercourse, counting the orgasms of the woman, counting his orgasms, coming up with metrics like natural rate of intercourse for a male, and orgasms per seconds to orgasm. So 90 seconds to orgasm is really like something that a number freak would come up with. And that's what I am. Somebody who's always been at home with numbers, has always converted the world to numbers, who likes stuff. I mean, as a kid, I loved to play baseball. I loved to watch it. I loved to follow it. I mean, a kid, following baseball, that's, following professional baseball, that's numbers. That's all it is. So, the able to use number sense to convert the world into measurements that can give guidance to behavior and produce satisfaction in life, a better sex life. This is what you call psychological capital. My wife had this tendency to go up to people that she didn't know and start conversations, to meet the neighbors. I mean, she became interested. She liked to talk to people. She really liked to talk. And she would give them, the neighbors, little inexpensive Christmas presents. When she died, they came to offer condolences to me. I didn't know who they were. I hadn't met any of them in the 4 years we had lived there. I mean, I'd met like next door. I didn't know their names. And because it just wasn't attractive. It wasn't fun. Okay, I'll go on to part 2, to part 3, which we'll call psychological capital.